Over the summer, I visited Scotland and recorded my experience visiting the Kelvingrove Museum in Glasgow and made some art documenting my trip. The building itself is gorgeous, and I spent some time admiring the architecture. The first work to really stand out to me is a sculpture called Motherless by George Lawson. The piece has this intense emotional power, and I was really moved by the expressions on the subject's faces and felt vested in the snapshot of this father and daughter story. Moving down the hallway, a portrait of actress Vivien Leigh stood out to me. It was made in the 1930s by Thomas Contrell Dugdale, and I'll talk a little bit more about this piece later. The museum also documents a lot of Scotland's rich history. I really liked this artillery display because of the dynamic wire figures that were used to pose with and hold the various swords on display. Moving along, I spent some time in this exhibit of work by Czech, Scottish, Jewish artist Mary Ann Grant. She is a Holocaust survivor, and the watercolors and drawings on display relate to her life during and after the war, as well as her experience moving to Sweden after the concentration camps were liberated. Down the hall, I was able to see some portraits and still lifes that were painted by a group of Scottish women artists called the Glasgow Girls. I was intrigued by the use of light and shadows in these paintings, as well as the vibrant colors on display in these images. This same hallway also had a small display dedicated to the Scottish colorist. My favorite of the display was this portrait of William McInnes by Leslie Hunter, who I'll talk about more later. The next gallery I went into was a room full of colorful European artworks building off of the Impressionist movement. I like that there was this little interactive setup for kids visiting the art gallery as well. Some of the artworks featured in this room include an early Pablo Picasso painting and a Vincent van Gogh painting. Next was an entire gallery devoted to the Scottish colorist that I talked about earlier. This was probably my favorite room in the whole museum because I really enjoyed the paintings that I got to see in here. I'm drawn to these images of women in black by Frances Cadell. I'm wondering if these are pictures of the same women and what her story is. The painting I'm most drawn to is this portrait of Dr. Tom J. Honeyman by Leslie Hunter, who I talked about earlier. I decided I wanted to try drawing this painting in my sketchbook with some color pencils because I really liked the colors in the face and the interesting items in the background. I decided to finish the drawing later so I could take my time on it, but I think it was still really cool that I got to work on this drawing of the painting while I was sitting right in front of it. Moving on, I went through a gallery highlighting the way Scottish artists have expressed Scottish identity in their works throughout history. Before leaving, I wanted to spend some time with the famous painting of Christ of St. John on the Cross by famous Spanish surrealist Salvador Dali. I appreciated the videos that gave some extra information about the painting. He is most known for his images of melting clocks in the painting Persistence of Memory. In 1961, the painting was slashed with a stone and had to be restored. Viewing the painting up close allowed me to better see both the damage and the restoration work that was done to the painting. As we moved toward the exit, I walked through these floating heads. I loved how weird they were, and that they all had different expressions and emotions on display. The last gallery of paintings I walked through was another one of my favorites in the museum. I really liked this painting that was on display in such a way where you could walk around and see that the artist painted on the other side of an old painting, and I appreciated how it was set up so that it was up to the viewer to decide which side they liked the most. I personally like this side with the stickers more. I always like when a museum has many paintings by one artist on display because you can see how their work has progressed from one year to the next. This collection of paintings by John Pringle was really exciting to me because I really felt like the layered brushstrokes and dabs of vibrant colors made the paintings vibrate with energy. The label on this gray painting made me laugh because it felt very passive-aggressive to me. It said that he works better on smaller scales, so it lacks some sparkle, and that just made me laugh. As I head into this room, I was really drawn to this image of a woman in red by Wyndham Lewis. I know I'm saying that wrong, but I'm trying my best. We finished our visit by looking at these interior design works by Margaret McIntosh. She made these paintings with 3D components like glass beads and twine attached to the decorative panels to really make them pop out more. And I really enjoyed looking at her artwork as I finished up my visit at the museum. A few weeks later, when I returned home, I revisited my drawing of the Leslie Hunter painting from the gallery, and I decided to include a drawing of the motherless sculpture as well. I started with colored pencil, and when I got stuck, I tried working on the picture while looking at my reference photo upside down. I realized that because I was drawing a white sculpture, a lot of my success was going to depend on the value or shading of the drawing, so I covered the area in a blue colored pencil, and then I started rendering the highlights of the form with my eraser and darkening shadows with a dark blue colored pencil. Something fell off, so I just decided to erase it, and I would try to restart. This time I tried to pay really close attention to my proportions, comparing the sizes of each body part of the figures, like the torso, to parts of the body like the leg, to better understand how big or how small each part should be when compared to other parts of the body. Follow along for part 2.